Stemple's husband of 11 years originally told police his wife went to the store in the middle of the night to get medicine. Her body was found just off the shoulder of Highway 75 a few hours later.
This became an enraged, brutal murder that's unthinkable. And so I want to make it perfectly clear that both of them are equally liable for this horrendous act.
It broke my heart that he hurt that woman. You know, he was my son. I didn't think that he would do something like that. It hurt for years. It didn't go away.
There were 3 people out there that night, and only one of them is still alive. And so how do I know I'm getting the whole story from this guy? I think everybody has things about themselves that they don't want people to know.
I feel like I'm more than just my crime. You know, I mean, that was a horrible time. It was a dark period in my life. And, you know, a lot of people are hurt. But I feel like I just wanted people to see me and have a chance to, you know, see me as more than just something they read on the internet.
Prosecutors say Stemple was a husband who first cheated on his wife, then killed her for money, nearly $1 million in life insurance, and because he had a girlfriend. They say he offered his girlfriend's cousin, Terry Hunt, $30,000 to help beat Trisha Stemple, then run over her with a truck and make it look like a hit-and-run accident.
Prosecutors say this case was one of the worst crimes they've ever seen.
You know, if I could take that moment back, you know, I mean, it would, I can't say that my life would have been better or that I wouldn't have went along to prison, but, you know, Trisha would still be alive. Her family wouldn't be missing someone that they loved. You know, and I would say that it was a horrible crime. There's no getting around it. You know, and I'm not saying that I don't deserve to come to prison, you know, and do a lot of time. I don't deny that or dispute it. But I would say that, you know, that while I participated in that, you know, that's not who I am. You know, it's hard to, you know, tell people, hey, you can trust me now. You know, I mean, that was then, you know, and I've changed. I'm not, and I don't think anybody's the same as they were when they were 16. John Stemple was my cousin's boyfriend, you know, and I got to kind of looking up to him. He seemed like a upstanding guy. I mean, he had a lot of the things that I wanted, like he had a house, you know, he had a car with a stereo system, you know, he seemed like he had things together. Just seemed like a good person. You know, I didn't find out till, you know, shortly after I met him that he was actually married. One day, I don't know if he came over to my house, I talked to him and I asked him, I was looking for a job. He said, well, what would you do for $50,000? And I was like, anything, you know, 16, $50,000 sound like a couple million. And then he asked me to help him kill his wife. I don't remember exactly what I said to him, but I agreed with it. I agreed to do it, you know, I remember that.
Were you scared?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you know, I mean, who talks about killing somebody? And I just blinded by greed and, you know, I didn't really think about backing out, you know, once I told him yes. I don't pretend to say that, you know, that I didn't know right from wrong. I knew it was wrong, you know, that was a hard time of my life. He was to tell her that the truck had broken down because we'd had the hood propped up to make it look like it was broke down on the side of the road. And he wanted me in the bushes waiting. He pulls up and he has her hold the flashlight in front of on the hood. And while he gets in the driver's seat and starts the truck up, you know, and the signal was, you know, when he revved the engine. That's when I ran up the small hill and hit her with the bat twice.
Did it knock her out?
No. The first one didn't, and the second one knocked her to her knees. I remember that.
Sean takes the bat from you.
Right.
And he continues to hit her. How are you feeling in this moment? You must have been scared out of your mind.
I was. I remember crawling up in the passenger side of the seat after that. And in my mind, all I see is it plays over and over again is seeing him doing that. And that's what haunts me more than anything. There's no quitting at that point.
And then what happened?
You know, I understand that this is important, but I also understand that Trisha's family is going to watch this. And I don't want them to have to relive the details. You know, they know them. I've told them.
That's a picture of the crime scene with her body there. In doing a job like this, you end up having things in your mind you can't unthink. And, you know, I certainly, to this day, it's been 28 years, 27 years, you know, I still have those in my mind. I do think about her. She was, you know, she was living her life. And she thought, you know, obviously nothing, you don't ever fathom anything like this happening to you. And she was, from what I was told by everybody, she was a great person. And she was brutally murdered. At the time, on the media, it was being displayed as a traffic accident. But I would say we believed from the outset that it was a murder. That's the baseball bat that was used in the death of Trisha Stemple. Sean Stemple went to the house, picked her up under the premise that his car had broken down. He got her out to the scene. Once she got out of the car, Terry began to beat her with a bat, and they had a bat that was wrapped in saran wrap as part of their premeditation, and he began to beat on Trisha. And at some point, Sean became dissatisfied with that and took the bat himself and beat his wife probably at least 30 times. I think it was survival. She was fighting. You know, you don't know what somebody would be thinking. I'm sure she was thinking why, but, you know, I think she was fighting. And ultimately, she's run over by the truck. This is the truck. Yeah, that is the truck that was used. Wish you could see that right bumper. There was actually her handprint was on the right front bumper, visible. So that goes to her fighting. She had crawled, I think, probably a couple feet. Again, she was just a fighter. And they drove over her again. And, I get choked up about it, but the severity of her injuries were gruesome. It was some things that are unimaginable, why a human being would do that to another. She was just a good person, and the way she died was horrible. And I think at some point he just decided that the only way he was going to be able to deal with that was to get rid of his wife. We further developed that there was a insurance policy of around $1 million. We came to the determination that Sean Stemple was the person that did it. And we ultimately came to the conclusion that Terry Hunt had helped him. And so I want to make it perfectly clear that both of them are equally liable, responsible for this horrendous act. And there's no way around that. What Terry Hunt did was evil. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that. He was sentenced to life for his evil acts, and I feel comfortable in that.
That's Terry. Yeah, he looks worried to me, and he should be worried. he had just, been involved in something very, very, very bad.
And what did you think when you heard that your son had been arrested for murder?
Well, I was hoping it wasn't true, of course. I was devastated. I was devastated my son was involved in it. It was a very vicious, bloody crime. No doubt about it. I didn't think that I ever brought him up that way. I never did. And it was the most brutalest crime that there was in Oklahoma. Well, Terry's pretty smart, pretty normal. We did a little fishing, we did a little camping. We had a great time as far as I know. He didn't start getting off the, till he's around 14. You become the company that you keep. It says it in the Bible. He did drugs and did whatever he wanted to do, and that got Terry off the, way off the path of doing right. I'd take him to school and he'd beat me home. We didn't live that far from the school, but if we dropped him off, we figured that he'd go. So we got him in the car, took him, dropped him off, and when we got home, there he was, So we called the school. They sent the policeman out there, and the policeman told Terry, you got a choice here. You can either go to school or you can go downtown and live off the street, whatever you want to do. He said, I'll live off the street. So they took him downtown and dropped him off. One thing that he did that, scary to me, he took my gun.
When he left?
Yeah. I knew it was getting worse, but there was nothing I could do about it. He refused to come home, and he got in with Stemples, and that woman got killed,
Well, I remember the day after, I came back and I forced myself to go to sleep. And I remember the day after, I'd seen it on the news. I'd looked out, I'd constantly be looking out the window, thinking they're coming, and there was just, and I would just throw myself on the bed crying, it's like it scarred me, there wasn't no, like celebration or nothing crazy like that. It bothered me, as it slowly, sunk in that this was, we'd killed somebody. We did the absolute worst thing you can do as a human being. Whether you get caught or not, you don't get away with murder. It haunts you. It's something that's internal, and there ain't no punishment externally that anybody could do to you, even life in prison or the death penalty that can be any worse than what you do to yourself in your own mind. So, I'm walking around with the torment and worried about going to jail. We set up in the interrogation room, me and this cop, for I don't know, seemed like hours, but it was probably maybe an hour or so. And the detective come in and let me talk to my lawyer. My lawyer was like, man, he's pretty much, they got you. And I said, I'll tell him.
The prosecution's case or your story calculated what must have been 30 baseball bat blows to her body. About how many you think there were?
In my mind, I play it, and I play that part over and over again. And I can't pinpoint the exact number of it, but I know that it was quite a lot, you know what I mean? Yeah.
And you hit her twice, and then
Right.
you had to stop. Is that right?
Right. When I was at the preliminary hearing, when you get in them situations, you want it to be over with. You want to get it over with as quick as possible. You know, and after the preliminary hearing, I laid in my rack and I thought about it, you know, and I remembered that, you know, I mean, I didn't forget I did that, but I knew I didn't tell him that at the preliminary hearing. And, you know, I knew that that was, you know, something that happened and that needed to be told. And so the next time I talked to the lawyers, you know, I told them that, you know, I mean, that didn't help my case. You know, in fact, that made me more culpable than what I was prior.
Because at trial, you say that you ran her over and that Sean also ran her over. Is that correct?
Right. I can recall, I think he rolled over trying to drive over her hip. I remember that.
Okay. And then and then you roll over her.
Right, over her chest.
You roll over her chest. And then she gets up and walks from there. She crawls to the side of the road.
Yes. I didn't know what to do. I was just kind of, I don't want to say autopilot, but he was directing it and he's telling me, you know, what to do.
And what's he telling you to do?
Well, like he'd tell me to, like, you know, help him move her and, you know.
So would you say that he's in charge at this moment?
Oh yeah, he was definitely in charge.
What do you think your punishment should be for this crime?
I think I'm living my punishment. I think. But I mean, and while I hope, you know, to get out, you know, I'd like to, you know, get out and do something. I know I owe a big debt to, you know, to a lot of people, to society, and I'd like to do something to make my life count, you know, because in prison, you're kind of, it's like everything's on pause. I've been in almost 30 years and, you know, I don't know if I'm any closer to getting out than I was, you know, 30 years ago.
If you could just tell me your name.
My name's Maureen Hunt.
And how are you related to Terry Hunt?
I'm Terry's wife. In the state of Oklahoma, you can throw a rock and hit somebody who has a loved one that's incarcerated. And so I have some really good friends whose son was incarcerated. And so I was introduced to Terry. This is a guy who I think that you would get along with. You know, he's a great guy. And so we started writing. He's a great writer. And so we wrote back and forth a lot. And, you know, it was like 6 months before he actually told me about his crime. He wrote me a letter and said, I want to go ahead and, you know, talk to you about my crime, because I think we were both really enjoying each other's company, and he didn't want to get too far into it, even as a friend, and then tell me what happened for me to turn around and say, I'm out. And so I did what everybody else did, and I got online, and same thing, Terry Lee Hunt, you know, and it pops up, and saw that headline. I thought, yeah, this is not your average murder. This is bad. Yeah, that's probably the first headline that comes up when you Google him: teen beat woman to death on Tulsa Road. I have friends who've lived here for a long time, and they remember this crime. It was notorious. And it made me really sad because I thought, this isn't the guy I've gotten to know at all. I could not wrap my head around it, to be honest. But according to Terry, teen beat woman to death is not accurate at all. Terry did not beat her to death with a bat. He started to, he hit her twice, and then he told Sean, I can't do it. I can't do it. There were 3 people out there that night, and only one of them is still alive. And Sean was executed in 2012. How do I know I'm getting the whole story from this guy? And so I took a year to make sure that he was exactly who he said he was and not who the internet said he was. I confronted him a lot. I'd go to visit with my list of questions and ask him because I had to know the answers. And it was difficult. I was ashamed of what he did. But I feel like the person that Terry was then was a completely different person than I know now, 28 years later. People are led, and 16-year-olds are even easier to lead. And Sean knew that. He knew exactly what he was doing when he was grooming Terry. Terry was manipulated by Sean. I believe in him so much. I have so much hope, and, hopefully the world will see him for who he is.
Stemples made him do it. He was forced to do what he had to do.
You think he was forced?
Oh yeah, he was forced. I don't think that he was brought up, to do that, and I don't think that he had the courage to do that. He was pressured. He was Stemples, the guy that hired him to help him kill his wife. He had threatened him about me and my wife and my other son. Said, if you don't go through this, I'm gonna kill them. And that's how he got involved deeper. I wish he'd have told me. You know what I mean? He was took advantage of because he was a young kid, and this guy was a coach. If you got a coach, he can manipulate kids. That's what he does. Now he's paid what he did. Now he's looking for a chance to get out, and that's what he deserves. He deserves one more chance.
And that's Sean Stemple. I really don't think much of this guy. I mean, he's pathetic. I think he's a very good manipulator. I think that's what he thrived with. He was very accomplished in his profession as a soccer coach, so he had a little bit of a reputation, I believe, for having some charisma, and people liked him, and I think that he used that to gain whatever he wanted. I think that's just a part of his personality. He just seemed very controlling and manipulating, and exactly what he was. Terry was so young. He's just a kid. Terry was very vulnerable. And as any predator does, they're going to pick somebody they can manipulate. And that's exactly what happened here. He was ripe for the picking because of his age and his problems he was having. But he was just as guilty and just as involved as Sean Stemple. Plain and simple. In fact, there was another attempt prior. My understanding was a couple of weeks prior to the actual murder, they had made a tentative date to commit the crime, and they ended up not being able to do that because they could not get Trisha to go along with it. She wasn't feeling well. I believe she was ill at the time.
Yeah, me and Nate were out there waiting, and she was supposed to show up. And then when we seen the car pull up, it was Sean, and he was saying that she was sick and couldn't come.
And so they had to change plans. Terry Hunt knew what he was doing, had many times to say no, and he chose not to.
So you had 2 weeks to think about it. he made the decision not to show up.
I did have the 2 weeks, and I've heard the detective say that, this guy had 2 weeks to change his mind. And during those 2 weeks, I thought that there would always be something that would come up, that this, like, I never really believed that this would ever happen. It didn't become real to me until it started happening. Until, they pulled up and she was there. Just looking back, if I could take that back, I know that her family misses her. And I'd hope that they know that I know that I've hurt them. And I'd hope they know that I'm sorry.
Why should people believe you now? Is there anything you can say to?
That's a tough question because, people, I understand I'm in prison, I'm in prison for murder, and, I've tried to educate myself. I got my GED when I first come to prison. I've earned an associate's degree. I'm almost got my bachelor's degree. I've talked to, young kids, kids they brought into the prison. And I've tried to use my time as wisely as possible and try to contribute wherever I can. I would like to think that, I've done enough to show that I'm better, that I've improved myself, that I've grown up, I've matured, and that I have something to offer. If they let me out, that I have something that I can give back.
I think essentially you're asking people to kind of make a leap of faith.
That's what parole boards do every time they recommend somebody for parole, because at the end of the day, only you know what you think and what you're gonna do.
When Terry proposed to me, I knew for the rest of my life I was going to be the wife of a murderer, even after he's out of prison. And I had to face him face to face and look at him in the eye and reconcile that in my mind. And that took a while, It took a while for me to get past that, because that's not the man that I know now. I have no reason not to believe him. And I do feel like he is remorseful, and I do feel like he's compassionate and a good person, and someone that I love so much and believe in so much that I did end up marrying them. I could have just turned my back on him like everybody else has, especially last year when he didn't make parole. That was, oh God, that was one of the hardest days of my life. I could have just turned my back and said, I can't do this anymore. And he was terrified that I was going to walk away.
Did you think about walking away?
No, I never thought about it, because walking away would have been abandoning the best thing that ever happened to me.
He said, well, what would you do for $50,000? And I was like, anything, $50,000 sound like a couple million. I don't pretend to say that, that I didn't know right from wrong. I knew it was wrong,
And that's where the greed comes in.
That's where the greed comes in.
I can see it upsets you.
Hey, that was a hard time of my life.
It's hard to see that. I've never seen him cry. The day that he called me after the parole board denied him, he called me on the phone, and I had to say, they said no. And he cried, and I had to hear him cry, and all he would say is, I'm sorry I can't come home to you. I'm sorry I can't come home to you. And that's the only time I've ever heard him cry. And that was tough. It was really hard. 28 years later, he still has nightmares about it. It's not something he'll ever forget. The crime will never change. You can't go back and erase that. That's history. Yeah, that's history. And if he could go back and change it, of course he would. I don't look at him and think, this guy's a killer. He has grown into the kind of man who deserves a second chance.
I believe he's entitled to have a consideration to be let out. So that I thought maybe my unique involvement might help. You know, my oldest son is an addict and is sober 10 years now, but that's definitely changed me for the better. It's made me a better person. It's made me a better lawyer, and it's made me more empathetic. Terry Hunt was very, very young when he was sentenced to life. He did a horrible act, despicable, no excuse. And in the same breath, he has done the time. And he hasn't just done the time, he's done the work. He's very accomplished within the prison system as being a productive member of that system. If the system doesn't look at that and say, well, maybe we need to consider letting him out, then I don't know what the system's for. I don't know what else he can do to better himself or put himself in a position to be eligible to get out with a life sentence. I say all this with the understanding that the family of Trisha Stemple are in agreement with this. I would never go against their wishes.
You're sure you wouldn't harm anyone again? No one has to worry about you hurting someone?
Oh, of course not. I would never, I mean, that's the furthest thing from my mind. You know, I mean, that doesn't no good. Violence is failure. Violence is, you know, there's too much of it in this world. And I know that, you know, that's what people fear is, you know, somebody getting out of prison and harming somebody. That's why it's so hard to get out of prison.
You ever think about Trisha?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think about her, and when I pray that, you know, she would understand that I'm sorry that I ever thought that any amount of money was worth taking anybody's life. You know, I'm sorry that I didn't take them 2 weeks and go to the police, you know, that I could have stopped all this, you know, that I was the one person that could have, you know, changed the whole outcome, and I didn't. I failed. You know, I have faith, and I believe if you pray for your sins to be forgiven, you know, and you do it with a sincere heart, God will forgive.
I think for me, because I'm Loretta's daughter, I know she would have gone to great lengths to do whatever she needed to do for me, and she proved that the night she was murdered. How somebody could not make a sound through any of that, not screaming out for help. She went through it because she didn't want anything to happen to me. How can I just let that go? My mom was my hero that night. I owed it to her to do something about this. If I could become her hero by solving this, I was gonna do it. Just after sunset, on a warm summer evening, 4-year-old Heidi Jones is about to drift off to sleep when her 23-year-old single mother, Loretta, cracks open Heidi's bedroom door. That night, my mom came to my bedroom and she told me, "Don't come out." And I believe that if I heard any sound or anything that night, I did what my mom told me to do, and I didn't go out. In the morning, I looked out of my keyhole before going into my front room. When I opened the door, I saw something lying on the floor. My next vivid memory is I am out on the front porch, and my next-door neighbor is out there digging for worms. He says, "Heidi, come here, I have to show you something." And I says, I can't. I think my mommy's dead. When police arrived, they saw Loretta half-clothed, laying on the floor, deceased. There was blood on the couch. There was blood on the floor. There was blood everywhere. Loretta had been sexually assaulted, and she was stabbed twice in the chest and 17 times in her back, and her throat was attempted to be cut. The investigation didn't reveal any forced entry, any real signs of tremendous struggle. There wasn't tipped-over furniture. There wasn't broken windows. The door jamb wasn't broken. The police at the time did take quite a bit of forensic info: fingerprints, blood samples, carpet fibers, and some couch fibers as well. Investigators wait to interview Heidi until her family arrives. The sheriff kept calling my mother, trying to locate my father. And finally, my dad comes home. and he's very upset and looks kind of white and in shock. And my mother asked him, "What is wrong?" It was just such a shock, because I felt like nothing bad would ever happen to my family. There was 6 of us total, 6 children. They ranged to my oldest sister is 9 years older than me. And then Loretta was 7 years older than me. I had a really good relationship with Loretta. We shared a bedroom for, gosh, clear through my elementary years. We'd go to bed at night, and she'd have us look underneath the covers, and she'd say, "Do you see them? There's Fauna, Flora, and Merryweather, the little fairies from Sleeping Beauty." Her imagination was so awesome that she got me to believe that I could actually see them. When we grew up, I listened to music with Loretta all the time. The 60s music, Bobby V, Bobby Rydell, The Ventures, Elvis. And I do remember dragging Main Street a few times with Loretta before I got my driver's license, and then going to the little tasty freezes and just see if there's any new guys. When we found out that Loretta was pregnant, I remember my dad not really being upset that she was really pregnant, but upset with the father. But Loretta did want to keep her baby. There was no question about that. She was just happy that she was going to have this little baby, and she was just a happy mom when Heidi was born. Loretta did work for my dad, and she was taking accounting classes. She was really working hard on making her life better for her and Heidi. And Loretta was so awesome as a mom. She always had to make sure her little girl was taken care of. I remember we would go out and we would get ice cream. She made a ton of my own clothes. She made me dolls. She was a wonderful mom to me. The first thing that my mother said is, "Where is Heidi?" And we found out she was at the next door neighbor's house. So we went to go get Heidi, with her grandparents now at her side. Detectives asked Heidi what she saw and heard the night before. I know that I have something trapped in my brain of something that happened that night. I believe it was too traumatic for me to remember. I don't believe my mom screamed or cried that night. If I had heard my mom scream in the next room, I probably would have came out of the room to see what was going on. So I believe my mom was my hero that night by protecting me. The 4-year-old's memory is murky, except for one very important detail. I remember telling my grandma what I could possibly remember. I said, "Tom did it. Tom killed my mom." During the investigation, Heidi's grandma was jotting down everything Heidi was saying at that time. And there was an entry on this notepad on the morning that the body was discovered. Heidi told her grandmother, "It was Tom that killed my mom." They had a first name, just Tom. No last name, no description. That's all little Heidi can remember about the man who killed her mother. I still have so much hidden inside my head that doesn't want to come out. But I know that I knew Tom. Tom was a person that came around my mom, our house, quite a bit, because as a 4-year-old, I knew his name. As friends and family searched their minds for a Tom, detectives got a new lead about the night of Loretta's murder, July 30th, 1970. I lived about 3 blocks away from Loretta. At the time, I was 10 years old. My brother and his friend were outside playing ball. I was out riding my bike around the house, and I come around the corner and noticed that my brother had gone in the house, and it was starting to get dark, so I figured I'd better go in as well. As I was walking is when I noticed this man coming at me and held me up against the side of the house, and he had my hands behind my back. He was stepping on my feet and another hand over my mouth. I was trying to scream, and I couldn't get the scream out. It just wouldn't come out. I was terrified. I couldn't get away from him. Eventually, his hand kind of got loose, and I was able to scream really loud. Her brother, her stepdad, and her brother's friend ran outside to see what was going on, and they saw this suspect running. He ran south. Well, south. 3 blocks later is Loretta Jones's house. The odds of an attempted abduction and a homicide that happened within an hour of each other, 3 blocks away from each other, is far more than a coincidence. I would immediately assume that this was the same guy that killed Loretta. So the police at the time are combing the area looking for a murder suspect and doing field investigation on pretty much anybody that's walking near the house or even miles away. They found an individual that was hitchhiking from Price to the town of Provo. This gentleman was carrying a pocket knife with what they thought was blood on it. They had taken him back to Price at that point in time. My mom and I had to get in the cop car, and they drove us to identify the guy. And when I looked at him and saw him, I knew right away it wasn't him. The hitchhiker is off the hook for the attack on Lori, and the knife he was carrying can't be linked to Loretta's murder. They eventually released the suspect they found in Provo. His alibi: he was nowhere in that area at that time. A lot of the town was just scared that here's this guy that killed my sister, and he had grabbed a little girl that night as well. Everybody's wondering, where's this guy? What happened to him? On August 1st, a tip is called into the sheriff's office. The caller suggests deputies look into a local railroad worker named Tom Egley. I knew that Loretta had dated Tom Egley one time on a blind date. I thought she didn't like him, and she didn't want anything to do with this guy. But Heidi was always right to the same story every time. You know, Tom killed my mom. He just seemed like he was a perfect suspect. At the time of this murder, Tom was living in a motel in Helper, Utah. He was living with his girlfriend, who was 8 months pregnant. Detectives pick up Tom and take him to the sheriff's office for questioning. Tom Egley explained to the police, on the night of the homicide, he hitched a ride with a couple of younger teens. He had been dropped off in Price at a little local fast food joint. He said he grabbed a burger and sat down on the curb and ate it. And then his story is that he was in Price just walking around window shopping, but he was nowhere near Loretta Jones's house. Egley insists that while in Price, he did not attack Lori or even visit Loretta. Tom says he wound up at a bar called the Highway Rendezvous on Springland Road, probably 11:30 at night. Investigators set out to corroborate Egley's story. At the Highway Rendezvous, the owner of the bar, she said that Tom did come in that night, kind of skittish, nervous. Tom had red speckles on his shirt, and he said he had been painting. Red paint must have got on him. The cops met up with Tom at his apartment, and he allowed them in to let them search his room. They did take a pair of Levi's that Tom said he was wearing that night, and a shirt. Detectives bag the clothing and collect hair, blood, and fingerprint samples from Egley. It's all sent to the FBI crime lab in Washington, D.C. I remember my mom's funeral. She had on a blue dress, and it had a super high collar so that you couldn't see where her neck had been slit. I remember looking in the casket, and I thought she looked like Sleeping Beauty. It was really hard to see Loretta. And there's her daughter, Heidi, just crying, realizing that her mother is gone now. I was pretty angry. 1 month after Loretta's murder, investigators received the FBI lab results. So the fibers that they discovered on Tom's clothing did match the fibers that were found to be similar to those on Loretta Jones's rug. Investigators feel that they had enough probable cause to arrest Tom. And that is what they did. Detectives believe that Tom Egley was being chased through the neighborhood for trying to kidnap an 11-year-old child, and they believe he recognized Loretta's home, and he went in. They had arrested a man. My brother and I went up to the jail and was asked to try to identify him. Jim Kulo believes that he was looking at the right person, but Lori could not positively ID Tom as the person who grabbed her. The evidence was pretty weak, all circumstantial. After Tom Egley pleads not guilty to Loretta Jones's murder, prosecutors present their evidence at a pretrial hearing. During this preliminary hearing, prosecutors did bring up the witnesses for Tom being in town that day. Seeing him at the bar, the prosecutor said the fiber evidence that the FBI produced out of their lab was similar in nature to the rug that Loretta had in her home. But Tom was known to have been in her home before. The case is thin. There's almost no physical evidence and no reliable witnesses. The judge ruled there was not enough evidence to bind him over to trial. So Tom Egley was released. Tom Egley just happened to be a guy at the wrong place at the wrong time walking around. Unsure if they ever had the right suspect. Detectives start over from scratch. Carbon County Sheriff Albert Pasick and Price City Police Chief, Art Poloni. They would come to our house regularly to interview me about what I knew that night, if there was anything else that I could possibly remember. But there's nothing else that 4-year-old Heidi can offer. I think a lot of people were confused of what really happened as we were. Where's this guy that killed Areta 1 year after her mother's murder? By the time Heidi turns 5, the case goes as cold as Utah's winter winds. My parents ended up adopting Heidi after Loretta got killed. With my dad, he was really hurting inside. I think this really took a toll on him. That's why maybe he passed away 4 years later at a pretty young age. Once my grandpa died, it was pretty much my grandma and me and my uncle that lived at home. And, life was happening. School was happening. And any time I tried to talk to my grandma about my mom, it would just make her cry. My mom was to the point where she just wanted Loretta to rest in peace. It was just kind of accepted, for lack of a better word, that my mom's murder wasn't going to be solved. We were all just trying to find something that was normal, just to heal and move on with our lives as individuals. I moved to California in 1986. Life was good. It was very freeing being able to tell people what you wanted them to know about you. Now, an adult, Heidi refuses to let her mother's case be forgotten. In 1989, I started this whole letter-writing campaign. I wrote to Price City Police Chief. I wrote to Cartman County Sheriff's Office. I wrote to the FBI. But it seemed like the more that I pressed for information on my mom's case, I started hitting brick wall after brick wall. I was getting nowhere. So I took all my notes and letters away into a binder. And hopefully, I'll pull it out again later in life. I was struggling hard in California. I know that my mom would have gone to great lengths to do whatever she needed to do for me. And she proved that the night she was murdered. How could I just let that go? My mom was my hero that night. I owed it to her. I owed it to her to do something about this. I approached my grandma, and I says, I'm going to see if I can't solve my mom's murder case. She said, why don't you just let it go? And I said, because I can't let it go. If I didn't do it, nobody else was going to do it. I really honestly had mixed feelings. I was kind of feeling a little bit like my mom. Maybe after all these years, we need to let Loretta rest in peace. But the other part of me was like, it's time for us to find out who really killed her. I moved back to Utah, and I actually met with the Price City Police Chief. And he felt that they had done everything they possibly could, except for interviewing the original suspect. I was feeling pretty devastated again. I was getting nowhere. 4th of July weekend, 2009, my car was stolen. I had jumped on Facebook and put, my car is stolen. Can you believe that? And David responded, oh, too bad I'm not closer. I could help. I met David Brewer when I was in high school. He's a year older than I am. He says, I work for Carbon County Sheriff's Office in Price, Utah. The case back in 1970 belonged to the Carbon County Sheriff's Office. And immediately, I got the ding. Ding, ding. I need to go talk to David Brewer. I called David Brewer, and I told him this story about my mom being murdered. It wasn't until I met her in person, and she handed me photographs, that the details started really kicking in. These were not law enforcement photographs. They were family photographs. I says, well, I'll just go down and get the case file, go grab all the evidence, and start going through it and get this thing going. But it was quickly discovered that there was no case file and there was no box of evidence. They were thrown away or missing. The old jail used to be the evidence room. They had a cell for the evidence room. I honestly think that when they moved the new jail from the old, I think someone probably looked at that case and just says, this will never be solved. And they tossed it. I mean, it's sad to say, but I think that's how it was. It's hard to tell why this case went cold in the first place. Without having the case file, I can't really say why it went dormant. But then, once the evidence was lost, and the case files were lost, it was bound to just stay that way permanently. being the rookie homicide investigator cold case guy. It is very disheartening when you don't have anything to go off of. You don't have a case file. While searching the state medical examiner's office, Detective Brewer finally locates a document from the original case. They did have a very good detailed medical examiner's report. It was discovered that a vaginal swab had been done, and there was semen present on it. And with today's standards, of course, in DNA, I thought I could have this guy in 10 minutes if I just had that swab, but it was gone with everything else. I had my peers and some of my superiors tell me that it was time to just let it go. Even my partner told me, "You've done all you can." But no, I never let it go. Besides, Heidi wouldn't allow me to quit. Shortly after, I ran a newspaper article for more information in this case because I was hoping the public could be my case file. So I get a call from this gal who said that she had info for me on my case. She said, "Have I ever seen that Loretta wrote the killer's name in blood?" And I says, "How would you know this anyway? I mean, you weren't allowed in the crime scene." And she says, "Yeah, I was." She says, "I was living with Heidi's grandmother at the time going to school. And the day after this happened, Heidi's grandfather asked her and one of Heidi's aunts to go to the house. The police let us go into the home long enough to get clothes and a few things for Heidi. So they went into the living room. And she says, I saw it right there with my own eyes. Didn't write the whole name. She only got the T and the O out. We pulled the photo up, blew it up, and there it was. Definite T and an O, written in blood. Wow. That is heavy-duty stuff. I get goosebumps right now thinking about that. Loretta was trying to tell the story herself and help us out. And it looks like the last thing she did on this earth was write the letter O. And she couldn't get the M in there for Tom in the beginning. And to be fair, I excluded the knowledge of an individual named Tom Egley. I could have only assumed that they didn't have enough evidence to bind it over for trial because they had the wrong guy. But at the end of the day, Tom Egley was the only person we could not eliminate as a suspect. And at that time, he became the focus as he was in 1970. Detective Brewer speaks with every living witness who testified in Egley's 1970 hearing and one witness who did not, Marcia Hidalgo, Egley's then girlfriend. We drove 14 hours to get to Kansas and met up with her. I asked her. I said, "Do you know anything about that homicide he was arrested for back then?" All I was ever told, this girl that he had been going with before I got there, had been stabbed 14 times. What do you remember about that night? You know, I was pregnant. I waited up for him. He didn't come. It was late. Tom Egley came home about maybe 3 in the morning. I was kind of ticked. You know, "Where were you at?" He's like, "Oh, you know, I'm here now." And then he went in and he took a bath in his clothes. He bathed in his clothes. He bathed in his clothes. And then, after he took a bath in his clothes, he put him in a bag, and then the next day took him down to the laundromat where this burn barrel existed, and threw him in there, and burned him. My jaw dropped. I did ask her if she told the cops then what she's telling me now, and she said she did. I have my doubts on that. Back then. She's 8 months pregnant with his child, so I think the protection end kicked in with Marcia. It was time to take my knowledge of things that people had told me and take it right to Tom himself. Okay, 11:35 a.m. I'm approaching the residence of Thomas Edward Egley for interview. I tracked Tom Egley down in a town called Rocky Ford, Colorado, and me and Detective Taylor went to go visit him. Tom is in his front yard doing some yard work. I wanted to know if we could take some of your time this morning. Talk to you about some issues back in Carbon County a few years back. Carbon County. So we went into his house. He was a collector of many things. A classic hoarder. Well, you got any idea why you think we might be here to talk to you? Well, years ago, one of my ex-girlfriends was killed. They arrested me for it, but they turned me loose. I asked him to tell me. I said, What do you remember that night I stopped at a drive-in or something there and got me a hamburger? I know I sat down on the curb and ate it. There was nothing going on. So I headed back. Marcia was at the hotel with the baby, so she knew I was gone. Loretta's daughter. Frankly. Named you back then. Well, yeah, she knew my name. I had been there. We kept talking. Tom, what do you think should happen to a guy 40 years after he kills a person? Do you think that person would deserve to go to jail now? Depends on whether he's done it again or not. You know, obviously, he did this and didn't do it again. Is this what he's trying to tell me? Something comes up. Be sure to call. I knew beyond any reasonable doubt that this was the guy and wanted to pitch it to our county attorney, which I did. His opinion was there was just not enough. We wouldn't ever be able to get it past their desk, let alone into a court hearing. So this thing got colder than it's ever got. When you work so hard on something, it's hard to swallow that pill. In 2016, Detective Brewer presents Loretta's case at a regional cold case seminar. One thing that came about was, have you ever thought about exhuming the body? And so a gal from a private crime lab stood up and says, they've retrieved DNA of people after 50-plus years in the grave. When I got back from that cold case conference, first thing I did is called Heidi, and I says, thinking about exhuming your mother's body. What do you think I told him? Give me a shovel. I'll help dig. The two main reasons it was decided to exhume Loretta's body was, 1, there was a chance we may recover DNA based on the autopsy records, and secondly, we were confident it would generate media attention. Both would be valuable. So as they were pulling the body out of the ground, water started pouring out of the vault, and the crime scene investigator looked at it and says, no, we're not going to find any DNA here. Next, detectives try a bluff. I called the Rocky Ford Gazette, told them we got a local suspect out there, and that we've discovered DNA on the body. The whole idea is to make Tom think we had DNA and see how he reacts. The day after we re-interned Loretta, I received a phone call from Rocky Ford, from a gal named Lisa Carter. I knew Tom Egley well. He was my neighbor, and he was a friend of my dad's. She had told me that. I have the right guy. Tom Egley is the one that murdered Loretta Jones. I says, well, what makes you think that? She says, well, I have property bordering his. And one day, Tom came over to the house in the backyard, and he was going to cut down my tree with a chainsaw because some of the branches, I guess, were hanging over to his property or whatnot. I was mad. So I went out to the driveway. I tapped him on the shoulder, and he came up with that chainsaw, and he swung like a baseball bat. I says, all that makes you think that, you know, Tom killed Loretta Jones. Tom had a look in his eyes. His eyes become a white crystal color, and you can't even see a soul. There's nothing there. He would have cut me in half in a heartbeat, and not thought twice. That's why when somebody said that he might have a propensity for violence, I believed it. She says, hey, if you need my help with anything, let me know. It was like a gift from God, and I kind of ran it by our prosecutors. You know, what do you think of using an undercover? They said, just don't come back without a confession. Lisa Carter knew Tom personally, so she had almost a daily contact with him. And wow, then I started thinking, we can use an undercover agent here, so a total stranger is going to step in, wear a wire, and help us. Lisa Carter is an incredible human being. We'd learned her husband was a Rocky Ford police officer, and Tom was aware her husband was out of town for several days for training, and so we adopted the plan. Can I smoke in here? Tom, sure. I went to Tom with the idea that I was going to betray my husband. I'm sick. If I was here, I'm done. So I explained to Tom Egley that my husband had been in training in Utah, and I let him know that during that training that Tom was the topic of the class, and that he was known as a suspect in the murder of Loretta Jones. I said, I've known Tom 20-plus years. Said, Tom's kind of in a bad spot. And I said, what do they have said that they still had the swabs from the night of the killing that the people from the autopsy took. Well, I don't know how they can have DNA. I told Tom that I felt like it was important to protect him. And the big part was, you're my dad's friend. Even though Dad is deceased, he would want me to help you. Everybody makes a mistake in their life. You know, everybody snaps. Everybody has a moment when they're just tried. And happens. During the conversations. I never feared for my safety. I was careful. I never turned my back. And I watched as any time his hands went near his pockets. Lisa spends 2 more days gaining Egley's trust. And then she strikes gold. And how far did Loretta live from the sandwich place? Not very far. I don't think. Tom said that on the night that Loretta Jones was murdered, he had gone into town to get a hamburger. He never did admit to trying to abduct the child. He said he just was in the neighborhood, and he knocked on the door. He said that Loretta Jones let him in. Okay, and the door closed. And then, what? What would you think happened if you had to guess? What would you think happened? Okay, and that made you feel how, like, he said that she walked into her kitchen, and it's my understanding that Heidi Jones's bedroom was off of the kitchen. I believe in my heart that Loretta knew that she was going to die, or there was going to be something really bad happening. And I believe she shut that door. And when she come back, I've stabbed her. It totally blew me away. He never changed his voice. And I think that's what got me. It was just like as if I was telling you about Sunday dinner. He acknowledged that she wasn't dead, that she was moaning. And I said, well, did you have sex with her? And he said, yeah, of course I had sex with her. He said it was consensual. And I said, Tom, you stabbed her. How's that consensual? And he said, she didn't tell me no. And it took me a while before I was able to process what I just heard. I don't believe there's any remorse to Tom at all. I don't believe he even cares. But I pulled myself back together. So you remember having sex with her. And then when I lost it, I cut her throat. And I left. That just blew me away. I could not react. I didn't know what to say. I know a good admission when you hear one. And I had it. I had a lawfully obtained admission to murder. And it was game on from then. I convinced Tom that the family wanted closure. And I said, let's call the detective. And let's see if we can sit down with him and talk to him. Egley agrees to speak with Brewer on one condition. Police can't arrest him at the meeting. Detective Brewer agrees. I'd be lying if I didn't say I wasn't nervous. But we got there. Tom invited us back in the house. It's been 46 years. So I'm scared every time somebody shows up at my door. It's a hard thing to look over your shoulder that long. Yeah, it is. It really is. And then right out of the blue, he just started talking. We had sex. There was no rape involved. Okay, I lost it because I'd been drinking. Do you remember cutting her throat? Yeah, but I don't remember ever stabbing her. Okay. Before I left Tom's house, we had asked Tom one more question. If you could tell Loretta's daughter anything in the world right now, what would you tell her I had just came out of the store? And Brewer called, and he says, hey, are you busy? And he's like, Tom said to tell you that he's sorry he killed your mom. And I'm like, oh my God, are you serious? Are you freaking kidding me? Are you serious? She was the only person that I wanted to call. And that was a very, very good moment. After Detectives Brewer and Hendricks returned to Utah, U.S. Marshals arrest Tom Egley for Loretta Jones's murder. He was arraigned, and Tom says he would confess to the murder if he didn't have to confess to the rape. And of course, Heidi was more than happy to take that. Tom Egley got 10 to life for murdering Loretta Jones. But 10 to life was the maximum penalty that could be given to him in 1970. He will be 96 years old when he goes out before the parole board. And I will make sure he doesn't get out. Tom stood up and the judge asked him if he had anything to say. And the only thing he had to say is, I'm sorry, I killed her. And I'm surprised you're doing something about it after 46 years. And, you know, our family's sitting there in the courtroom like, really? What do you mean, after 46 years? It doesn't matter if it was 46 minutes, 46 days, 46 years. The fact of the matter is, you killed our sister, And you not only took life away from her, but you took it away from her little girl at 4 years old. You took it away from me enjoying her as a sister. You took it away from her mother and father to enjoy her in their last years. And for somebody like that, not to show any remorse. It was just mind-boggling. This wasn't about closure. This was all about getting justice. 46 years it took, but we did it. I don't even know how to put into words what David Brewer means to me. It wasn't just that Loretta was a victim. Loretta mattered, and David took the time to know that. When David and I first started working together, 1% of all cold cases were solved. 1%. I learned to believe in the impossible. And as long as you have hope, you have a chance